Aisha Coleman winced as another contraction gripped her body, the icy February air seeping through Atlanta General Hospital's windows. She gripped the sheets, inhaling the sterile scent of disinfectant while monitoring equipment beeped steadily around her. 39 weeks of anticipation had culminated in this moment. Her baby boy was finally coming. Marcus, her husband of 6 years, stood awkwardly by the window, his attention fixed on his phone rather than on his laboring wife. His detachment didn't register as unusual to Aisha. She was too consumed by the rhythm of pain and release, the ancient dance of bringing life into the world. The nurse adjusted the fetal monitor, offering encouragement as Aisha's contractions intensified. "Your son has a strong heartbeat," she said warmly. Aisha nodded, reaching instinctively for Marcus's hand, but finding only empty space where he should have been. Something in his posture, rigid, distant, should have warned her. But even then, she couldn't have imagined the cruelty that was about to unfold. Between sharp breaths and mounting pressure, Aisha watched through sweat-blurred vision as Marcus approached with a manila envelope clutched in his trembling hand. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his face, revealing the cowardice in his eyes that he couldn't disguise. "What's this?" Aisha asked, her voice barely audible above the medical equipment's steady hum. The contractions subsided momentarily, giving her clarity enough to see Marcus's averted gaze. He placed the envelope on her bedside table, the paper making a soft scraping sound against the laminate surface. "Papers," he replied flatly, still not meeting her eyes. "Divorce." The word hung in the air like a toxic gas. Aisha's mind refused to process it, convinced she had misheard. "What?" she whispered, reaching for the envelope with shaking fingers. Marcus shifted his weight, keys jingling in his pocket as he prepared his escape. "I can't do this anymore. I've met someone else. You'll be better off without me," he said mechanically, as if reading from a script he'd rehearsed. Before Aisha could respond, before she could scream or plead or curse his name, Marcus turned and walked out the door. The soft click of its closing echoed with devastating finality. Just like that, in her most vulnerable moment, Aisha found herself abandoned. Heartbroken, humiliated, and in increasingly intense labor. The nurses rushed in, responding to the sudden spike in Aisha's heart rate on the monitor. They were unaware of the emotional trauma that had just transpired, focusing instead on the medical crisis at hand. "Blood pressure's rising," one called out, while another adjusted the 4-drip. Aisha lay frozen, her mind fracturing between the physical demands of childbirth and the psychological devastation of betrayal. The contractions returned with renewed vengeance, and this time Aisha didn't hold back. She screamed, a primal, guttural sound that carried the weight of both her physical pain and shattered heart. Hours blurred together in a haze of agony and disbelief. There were no soothing words from a supportive partner, no hand to squeeze during the final push, no proud father's tears when the first cry pierced the air. Instead, Aisha gave birth to Isaiah Coleman in a room full of strangers, with her soul torn in two. When the nurse finally placed the tiny, wrinkled newborn on her chest, his warmth seeping through the thin hospital gown, Aisha broke. She traced his perfect features with trembling fingers, the bow of his lips, the curve of his nose, the arch of his eyebrows, and whispered into his tiny ear, "It's just us now, little man. But I promise you'll never feel alone." The days following Isaiah's birth passed in a fog of sleep deprivation and paperwork. Marcus never returned. His name remained conspicuously absent from the birth certificate, a blank space that seemed to mock Aisha's new reality. The hospital social worker offered resources for single mothers, her kind eyes betraying pity that made Aisha's spine stiffen with nascent determination. When she was finally cleared for discharge, Aisha strapped Isaiah into the car seat her mother had hurriedly purchased and stepped out into a world that had changed completely. The drive home to her small apartment felt surreal. The same buildings and streets she'd passed countless times now seemed alien, belonging to a life she no longer recognized. Inside, she found drawers half empty, Marcus's belongings cherry-picked from their shared existence. On the kitchen counter sat his wedding ring, a cold circle of gold that once symbolized forever. Aisha slid to the floor, Isaiah sleeping peacefully in his carrier beside her, and allowed herself 1 hour of complete breakdown. She sobbed until her throat was raw, until her eyes swelled shut, until the weight in her chest threatened to crush her entirely. Then, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across her living room floor, she wiped her face, stood up, and made a silent vow. This pain would not define her son's life. Life after the hospital tested every fiber of Aisha's being. The nights seemed endless, especially when Isaiah developed colic at 3 weeks old. His tiny face would scrunch up in discomfort, wails bouncing off the walls of their apartment until dawn broke. Aisha would pace the floor, gently bouncing him against her shoulder, singing lullabies even when her voice grew hoarse from exhaustion. "Just a little longer, baby," she would whisper as much to herself as to him. Bills piled up with alarming speed. Her part-time position as a substitute teacher barely covered the essentials, forcing her to dip into her meager savings while applying for government assistance. The pride she had to swallow tasted bitter, but the alternative, failing to provide for Isaiah, was unthinkable. Friends gradually disappeared, unable to relate to her new reality or uncomfortable with the raw pain she couldn't always hide. Some nights, after finally getting Isaiah to sleep, Aisha would stand under the shower's hot spray and let the water mask her tears. But even in those darkest moments, she never regretted her son. When he would wake for midnight feedings, his tiny hand curling reflexively around her finger, Aisha found strength she never knew existed. She began researching remote tutoring positions she could work during Isaiah's naps and after he went to sleep. Between feedings and diaper changes, she devoured books on child development, determined that her circumstances wouldn't limit her son's potential. By the time Isaiah turned 3, Aisha had established a new normal. She had secured several regular tutoring clients, built a modest emergency fund, and even started taking online courses when Isaiah slept. The little boy was thriving. Curious, verbal, and affectionate, with Aisha's warm brown eyes and infectious laugh. On his 3rd birthday, as Isaiah gleefully smeared chocolate cake across his face, Aisha made a decision that would alter their trajectory. "I'm going to nursing school," she announced to her mother, who had become their most stalwart supporter. "The evening program at Atlanta Metro will let me attend while you watch him." Her mother squeezed her hand, eyes glistening with pride. "You always were the strongest of my children," she said. The application process was daunting, essays written in exhausted fragments between responsibilities, entrance exams studied for in the pre-dawn hours before Isaiah woke. When the acceptance letter arrived, Aisha taped it to the refrigerator, a tangible reminder that forward motion was possible even when the path seemed impossibly steep. The program would take 3 years of relentless effort, but Aisha calculated that Isaiah would start elementary school just as she finished. Perfect timing for a new chapter. Nursing school tested Aisha's resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. The coursework was rigorous, demanding precise attention to detail even when she was functioning on minimal sleep. Clinical rotations meant long hours on her feet after already full days with Isaiah. When her son caught the flu during midterms week, Aisha thought she might finally break. She sat beside his feverish body, reviewing anatomy flashcards while applying cool compresses to his forehead, terrified of failing him in either capacity. as a mother or as a student with dreams that would secure their future. Her professor offered a makeup exam, impressed by Aisha's dedication. "You don't give up, do you?" he asked when she aced it despite everything. "Not an option," she replied simply, the dark circles under her eyes testifying to the cost of her determination. Each semester brought new challenges: childcare complications, financial strain, and the bone-deep fatigue that never quite lifted. Yet Aisha maintained her GPA, earning scholarships that eased their budget constraints. Her classmates, mostly younger, unburdened by parental responsibilities, marveled at her efficiency. What they didn't see were the sacrifices. Meals eaten standing up, laundry done at midnight, personal needs perpetually backburnered. But whenever doubt crept in, Aisha would watch Isaiah sleeping, his chest rising and falling peacefully, secure in the knowledge that his mother would move mountains for him. By the time Isaiah turned 6, Aisha had graduated with honors and secured a position at Atlanta Regional Medical Center. The night shift allowed her to homeschool Isaiah during the day, a decision she made after noticing his accelerated learning abilities. Their routine became a carefully orchestrated dance, mornings spent on reading and mathematics, afternoons dedicated to science experiments and outdoor exploration. Evenings filled with dinner and stories before Aisha's mother arrived to take the night shift while she worked. Isaiah flourished under this arrangement, reading at a 9th grade level by 5th grade and developing a particular affinity for science that mirrored Aisha's own interests. One autumn afternoon, as they sat beneath a maple tree identifying leaf patterns, Isaiah looked up with serious eyes. "Mom, why don't I have a dad?" he asked, the question she had been both expecting and dreading. Aisha set aside their nature journal, pulling him close. The scent of his shampoo, apple and something uniquely him, grounded her as she considered her response. "Your dad made a choice," she said finally, keeping her voice steady. "But so did I. I chose to love you with everything I had, and that love has been enough to build our life together." Isaiah studied her face, absorbing her words with the solemnity that sometimes made him seem older than his years. Then he wrapped his arms around her neck, hugging her tight. "Then you're enough," he whispered. In that moment, warmed by autumn sunlight and her son's unconditional acceptance, Aisha knew he would grow up stronger than his father had ever been. Isaiah's academic excellence continued to blossom as he entered his preteen years. His teachers requested meetings not to discuss problems, but to express amazement at his intellectual curiosity and emotional maturity. "He approaches challenges differently," his science teacher explained. "When most kids hit a wall, they give up. Isaiah just finds another angle." Aisha recognized this resilience as the unintended gift of their circumstances. Her son had never known anything but perseverance. At 12, Isaiah won his first regional science fair with a project on affordable water filtration systems for underserved communities. The prize included a mentorship with a professor at Georgia Tech, opening doors neither of them had anticipated. That same month, fate orchestrated an unexpected encounter. Stopping for gas after Isaiah's basketball practice, Aisha glanced up to find Marcus at the adjacent pump, 6 years of absence condensed into a chance meeting between fuel dispensers. He had aged visibly, hair thinning, lines creasing the skin around his eyes, shoulders slightly stooped. "You look good," he offered awkwardly, gaze darting between her and the Mercedes he now drove. Aisha felt nothing, no anger, no longing, no regret. Just a distant recognition of someone who had once been central to her life. "You doing okay?" he pressed when she didn't immediately respond. She nodded, allowing herself a small, genuine smile. "More than okay," she replied truthfully. Isaiah emerged from the convenience store then, tall for his age and carrying himself with quiet confidence. His eyes darted curiously between the adults. "Who's that, Mom?" he asked. Aisha glanced at Marcus, who seemed transfixed by the boy who shared his features but not his presence. "Just someone from the past," she answered gently, guiding Isaiah toward their car, a reliable Honda, fully paid off and symbolic of their hard-won stability. High school arrived with remarkable swiftness, bringing with it Isaiah's blossoming into a young man of exceptional promise. His dual enrollment at Georgia Tech placed him in college-level science courses while still a sophomore, accelerating his path toward the medical career he had begun to envision. "I want to become a doctor," he confided to Aisha one evening as they reviewed his course selections, "so moms don't have to cry alone in hospitals." The statement, delivered with such casual sincerity, momentarily robbed Aisha of speech. Her son had no idea of the significance behind his words, how perfectly they captured the transformation of their shared pain into purpose. She printed that quote later, laminating it and tucking it inside her work locker where it served as a daily reminder of how far they had come and the distance they could still travel. Isaiah's high school years were marked by academic triumphs, science fair championships, perfect SAT scores, research internships. But Aisha made certain they celebrated smaller joys as well. They maintained a Friday night tradition of homemade pizza and board games, fiercely competitive Monopoly sessions often stretching past midnight. She attended every debate tournament, every basketball game where he served as team manager, every academic decathlon, her voice always the loudest in celebration of his achievements. Occasionally, she caught other parents watching her with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. The single mom who worked night shifts still managed perfect attendance at school events, who helped with calculus homework between clinical shifts, whose relationship with her son seemed built on mutual respect rather than mere authority. For his senior capstone project, Isaiah chose to explore the impact of single-parent households on academic achievement, challenging prevailing narratives with data and personal experience. The resulting video documentary featured interviews with successful adults raised by single parents, interspersed with statistics and expert commentary. Isaiah ended the piece looking directly into the camera, his expression earnest yet commanding. "Success isn't about who's in your corner at the start," he stated with quiet authority. "It's about who never left." The project earned him top marks, but neither he nor Aisha anticipated what happened next. Someone, likely a teacher, uploaded the video to YouTube, where it resonated with viewers far beyond their community. Within 48 hours, it had accumulated over 1 million views. Comment sections flooded with stories from people sharing similar journeys. Media outlets began reaching out, interested in the composed young man who had articulated something so universal about human resilience. One morning, Aisha woke to a voicemail from a Good Morning America producer. "We'd love to have you and your son on the show," the woman explained enthusiastically. "Your story has touched so many people." Aisha sat on the edge of her bed, phone clutched in trembling fingers, barely breathing. For years, she had operated in the shadows, unnoticed and unseen except by those in her immediate circle, holding her world together with equal parts grit and grace. Now suddenly the spotlight beckoned. The television appearance transformed their private triumph into a public narrative. Dressed in a soft blue dress that complemented her warm brown skin, Aisha sat beside Isaiah in the New York studio, cameras capturing their intertwined hands. The host, professionally empathetic, leaned forward. "Aisha, your son credits you for everything he's become. What kept you going through those difficult early years?" The question, though expected, momentarily transported Aisha back to those darkest days, the sleepless nights, the empty bank accounts, the moments of doubt that visited in the pre-dawn hours. She looked into the camera and answered with hard-earned wisdom. Knowing I was his first and only line of defense, she said simply. I couldn't afford to quit. The studio audience applauded warmly. Isaiah squeezed her hand, then added his perspective with the eloquence that had become his hallmark. My mother didn't just raise me, he stated, emotion making his voice slightly husky. She rebuilt herself in the process. The segment aired nationally, clips shared across social media platforms, hashtags like #Aisha'sLight and #RebuildingLife trending for days afterward. That evening, sequestered in their hotel room above Manhattan's glittering landscape, Aisha's phone lit up with a text message from an unfamiliar number. It was Marcus. I saw the interview. I'm sorry. I was a fool. She read it twice, then set the phone aside without responding. She felt no satisfaction in his regret, no vindication in his acknowledgement of failure. She simply had nothing left to say to the man who had missed everything: first steps, first words, first achievements, and now this first moment of public recognition. His absence had long ago ceased to be a void in their lives. Regret was his burden to carry, not hers. College acceptance letters arrived in an encouraging deluge. Harvard, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, their offers of full scholarships testifying to Isaiah's exceptional record. The choice, however, came down to values rather than prestige. I want Morehouse, Isaiah announced one evening, referring to the historically black men's college in Atlanta. I want to be trained by black excellence. Aisha nodded, something like destiny settling comfortably in her chest. She had hoped for this choice without imposing it, understanding the importance of education that affirmed his identity as well as his intellect. Just promise me you'll keep your feet on the ground, she cautioned, knowing how easily success could breed entitlement. Isaiah grinned, the expression lighting his features in a way that still sometimes caught her off guard with its pure joy. Only if you promise to keep your head held high, he countered. She laughed then, the kind of laugh that comes only after healing. Full-throated and unfettered by old pain. The 4 years at Morehouse transformed Isaiah from a promising young man into a leader of exceptional caliber. He maintained perfect grades while volunteering at community health clinics, mentoring high school students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and interning at Atlanta's top hospitals. The sacrifices continued. Late-night studying, limited social life, careful budgeting of his scholarship funds, but now they were his choices made with clear-eyed understanding of their purpose. Midway through his junior year, Isaiah approached Aisha with an idea that would extend their impact beyond their personal journey. I want to start a foundation, he explained, laptop open to a presentation he'd prepared. For young single mothers pursuing education. I want to call it Aisha's Light. Aisha's protest died on her lips as he continued, outlining a program of child care assistance, textbook stipends, and mentorship opportunity. Because my mom never had help, he explained when his academic advisor asked about the name. I want to change that for someone else. Isaiah's graduation from Morehouse coincided with Aisha's promotion to nursing director at Atlanta Regional. Dual achievements that seemed fitting after their parallel journeys of education and growth. The ceremony itself was a celebration of black excellence, with graduates adorned in Kent cloth stoles symbolizing their heritage and achievement. As valedictorian, Isaiah stood before his classmates, professors, and family members gathered in the university's grand auditorium. He adjusted the microphone, scanning the crowd until his eyes found Aisha in the front row. I want to dedicate this moment to someone who never asked for applause but earned every standing ovation, he began, his voice steady with conviction. She was left with a newborn and divorce papers on the same day. And instead of breaking, she built. Every camera turned to Aisha, who sat shaking slightly, tears streaming unchecked down her face as her son continued. That's my mother. The reason I'm here, the reason I made it. The reason I believe in miracles. The audience rose in thunderous applause, many wiping their own tears as Isaiah's words resonated beyond personal testimony into universal truth about resilience and love. Videos of the speech uploaded within hours, once again catapulting their story into public consciousness. But this time, Aisha received the attention differently, not with surprise or humility, but with quiet ownership of her journey. When mothers across America shared the video, tagging her and calling her an inspiration, she responded with genuine engagement. When nonprofits offered speaking engagements, she accepted, recognizing that her experience might illuminate paths for others still finding their way through similar darkness. Medical school at Emory University kept Isaiah in Atlanta, a choice he made deliberately despite offers from institutions across the country. I want to be near you when I take this next step, he told Aisha simply. Nowhere would feel right without you close by. The admission, offered without sentimentality, reflected their relationship's evolution from dependency to chosen connection. Aisha had always feared becoming an obligation, the mother who sacrificed everything and then expected eternal gratitude in return. Instead, they had developed something rarer, genuine friendship built on mutual respect and shared values. Isaiah excelled in his medical studies, his particular interest in trauma care and community health informed by a lifetime of witnessing strength emerge from adversity. Meanwhile, Aisha transformed Aisha's light from concept to reality, securing nonprofit status and initial funding from donors inspired by their story. The foundation's first cohort included 10 single mothers pursuing higher education, each receiving comprehensive support designed to address the specific challenges Aisha had faced alone. One young woman, a nursing student with a toddler daughter, broke down during orientation. I was about to quit, she confessed. I didn't think anyone understood how hard this is. Aisha embraced her, remembering her own moments of near surrender. Someone does, she assured her. And now we're going to make sure you don't face it alone. By the time Isaiah completed his medical residency, specializing in trauma surgery with a fellowship in community health, Aisha's light supported 50 families annually across 3 states. The foundation's success attracted attention from policymakers interested in scaling its model nationally. On the 25th anniversary of Isaiah's birth, Aisha stood in the backyard of her modest but comfortable home, surrounded by friends, family, and the extended community they had built. String lights twinkled overhead, casting a warm glow across tables laden with food and flowers. Isaiah, now Dr. Coleman, respected not only for his surgical skill but for the chain of free clinics he had established in underserved communities across the South, raised his glass in toast. My mother started with nothing, he said, his voice carrying easily across the hushed gathering, but she gave me everything. My name is Dr. Isaiah Coleman, but before any of that I was hers. The crowd applauded warmly, many having witnessed their journey from its earliest, most difficult days. Later, as the party wound down, Aisha found a quiet moment alone on her back porch. She looked up at the stars, the same ones she had gazed upon during countless nights of fear and uncertainty, of hope and determination. We made it, baby, she whispered into the darkness. And for the first time in her life, every wound, every tear, every lonely night felt worth it. Not because they had achieved external success, though they had, beyond anything she could have imagined, but because they had preserved something infinitely more precious. Their capacity to love, to grow, and to extend healing beyond themselves. The legacy of that February morning, when abandonment could have defined them, had instead become a foundation from which generations would rise stronger. One afternoon the following spring, Isaiah arrived at Aisha's office with unusual excitement. "They want me to join a global medical initiative for women's health," he announced, leaning against her desk as she finished reviewing grant applications. The program would take him to clinics across Africa and Southeast Asia, implementing protocols that had proven successful in their local community outreach. And, he added, watching her closely, "they want you to come too as the keynote speaker for their international conference." Aisha laughed reflexively, the prospect seeming so far removed from her life's humble beginnings. "Me? Speak internationally?" Isaiah nodded, entirely serious. "Mom," he said softly, using the tone that always preceded his most profound observations. "You saved a life, mine, and now the world needs to hear how." That night, Aisha pulled out the old hospital bracelet from her labor with Isaiah, faded, bent, but carefully preserved, and placed it in a memory box beside the Time magazine cover featuring her son and the transcript of his graduation speech. The juxtaposition of artifacts told a story of transformation. From a woman abandoned at her most vulnerable to one whose voice now carried weight across continents. On stage in Geneva, Switzerland, with cameras, translators, and a full house of medical professionals and policymakers before her, Aisha stood tall in a tailored suit that reflected the professional she had become. "I was broken, discarded, and dismissed," she began, her voice steady and sure. "But I held on because sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you. Especially if that person is you." The crowd rose to their feet in recognition of a truth that transcended language and culture, that love, when channeled through unwavering determination, could transform not only individual lives but entire communities. The years continued their relentless forward motion. Isaiah became one of the most sought-after doctors in America, his innovative approach to community medicine featured in medical journals and policy papers. Aisha's light expanded internationally, supporting single parents pursuing education in 12 countries. Their story, once a private struggle for survival, had become something of a modern parable, referenced in commencement speeches and self-help books as evidence of humanity's capacity for resilience. Through it all, mother and son maintained the grounded perspective that had sustained them through harder times. They still made pizza on Friday nights when their schedules aligned. They still competed fiercely at board games. They still celebrated small victories alongside the larger ones that attracted public attention. Occasionally, Marcus resurfaced, first through cautious messages to Isaiah on social media, later through mutual acquaintances suggesting reconciliation. Isaiah remained polite but distant. "Forgiveness isn't the same as relationship," he explained to his therapist during a session focused on this aspect of his history. "I wish him well, but my life is already full." There was no bitterness in the assessment, only clear-eyed recognition that his mother had filled every void his father had left. There was no resentment to process, only release. As Aisha approached her 60th birthday, she began considering retirement from active management of the foundation. Isaiah, now married with 2 daughters of his own, suggested she document their journey in a memoir. "Not for fame," he clarified, "but so the truth doesn't get lost in all the retellings." Aisha resisted initially, uncomfortable with centering herself in the narrative. "Our story was never just about us," she protested. "It was about all the single parents fighting similar battles." Isaiah nodded, acknowledging her perspective while gently pressing his point. "Exactly," he said, "which is why it matters that you tell it accurately, both the struggle and the joy." She began writing cautiously at first, then with increasing confidence as memories crystallized on the page. The process became unexpectedly therapeutic, allowing her to recognize her own growth alongside Isaiah's. When the manuscript was complete, she titled it simply Both/ and A Rejection of the False Choice Between Personal Fulfillment and Parental Sacrifice That Society Often Imposed on Single Mothers. The book, published with minimal fanfare, found its audience organically, passed between women in similar circumstances who recognized their own experiences in Aisha's unflinching honesty. It never topped bestseller lists or garnered celebrity endorsements, but it reached exactly who it needed to reach, people at their breaking points who needed evidence that wholeness remained possible on the other side of heartbreak. Today, the legacy of that February morning in Atlanta continues to unfold in ways neither Aisha nor Isaiah could have predicted. The clinics he established have treated thousands of patients who would otherwise lack access to quality care. The foundation she built has supported hundreds of single parents through degree completions, career launches, and stable housing for their families. The ripple effects extend beyond statistics into transformed family trees. Children who will never know poverty because their parents received support at crucial junctures, communities revitalized through the talents of people once at risk of abandoning their potential. Isaiah's daughters, Zora and Maya, are growing up understanding their grandmother's story not as ancient history but as living testimony to the power of choice in the face of circumstance. They know the truth, that their existence traces back to a hospital room where one person walked out but another refused to give up. On Aisha's mantelpiece sits a framed photograph from Isaiah's medical school graduation, mother and son beaming into the camera with identical smiles, the culmination of a journey neither would have chosen but both had transformed into triumph. Beside it stands a simple plaque presented by the first cohort of Aisha's light recipients, inscribed with words that capture the essence of her unexpected life's work, for showing us that our darkest moments can become our greatest light. Like, subscribe, and share to support more stories of triumph against all odds. Visit aishaslight.org to learn how you can help single parents transform their darkest moments into their greatest light.